Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, it's a usual manoeuvre and not a withdrawal, says Kenya, as its troops pull out of a Somali base hit by an al-Shabaab raid earlier this month. Residents say that extremists moved in as soldiers moved out. Also, discontent over the presence in Ghana of former Guantanamo detainees hasn't gone away. Critics of the move point to ongoing threats of extremism on the continent as a reason authorities should be playing it safe. And Nigeria crash out and Tunisia crush Niger in the closing Group C matches of the African Nations Championships in Kigali. We get the pitchside lowdown from our correspondent. First, Kenyan forces have pulled out of 2 towns in Somalia 11 days after dozens of their peacekeepers were killed in an extremist raid on an African Union base in the country. That was at El Ad, one of the towns vacated on Tuesday. Somali jihadists al-Shabaab reportedly quickly moved in. Residents in Badade, another border town, also say that militants took over immediately after Kenyan forces left. Now, their troops are part of the African Union's AMISOM force that's been battling al-Shabaab in Somalia since 2007. Ilya Gridnev tells us more about the significance of Kenyan troops withdrawing so soon after that al-Shabaab attack.
Well, the Kenyan army is denying that it's a withdrawal, just sort of using the line that it's a tactical maneuver. We have a lot of information from people on the ground, as you said, that they have been moving and militants have moved into the towns. It certainly means that they are regrouping. They have to sort of they're still investigating what happened, and troops are still missing. We have families in Kenya that still haven't heard from soldiers that may not be dead. So there's still a lot of questions being asked about what happened and what will happen. And again, the Kenyan army it's been the worst attack for them ever since they entered into Somalia in 2011.
So Kenya's been hit hard by al-Shabaab, not only in Somalia, but in Kenya itself. Can Nairobi afford to scale back its commitment to the AMISOM mission?
I certainly don't think they will be scaling back. I mean, all the rhetoric that's been coming from Nairobi and the region of late or in the last 10 days has been that we are not moving, we're not going to let the terrorists win, or we're not going to let militants get to us like this. I think, again, it's unclear. The Kenyan army hasn't really been able to say what exactly the strategy is now. And just as in a regional force or in a regional sense, that Kenya is a neighbor to Somalia, and that neighboring border region is one that has been hit on numerous occasions by al-Shabaab militants. So there will be no real letting up of military presence or military attempts to defeat al-Shabaab in this region.
And more widely, though, there has been some criticism as to the effectiveness of AMISOM's mission so far.
That's correct. There's a lot of questions being raised about the effectiveness of AMISOM. I mean, in the last 16 months, there's been significant attacks and victories, you could say, by al-Shabaab. We've had, about 50 Burundians killed. We had 20 Ugandans killed in November, and now we've had this big attack on the Kenyans, where al-Shabaab are claiming 60, and we don't have any real numbers on that. The AMISOM force does, take cities, takes towns, defeats al-Shabaab in certain regions, but because it's a militant group that's very mobile, a lot of the time they just retreat into the bush and, just wait for a bit and then come back and hit hard when the Kenyans or the Burundians or whichever force are just weak or not ready, not expecting an attack.
Ilya Gridnev there for us in Nairobi. Now, a UN panel has recommended that both men on the front line of South Sudan's civil war should face sanctions for targeting civilians. The report suggests that the UN Security Council impose an arms embargo on President Salva Kiir and his former number 2 rebel leader, Riek Machar. Now, a political dispute between the two sparked the brutal conflict 2 years ago. More than 10,000 people have been killed since. A peace deal signed in August has been repeatedly broken by both sides. Riek Machar has placed the blame for violations squarely on Kiir's camp.
I have not violated any provisions of the agreement. It is the government that has violated the agreement. Ask them, where are they taking us? My team is in Juba. Soon we will send more teams to Juba for dissemination of the peace agreement. There is no way except implementing this peace agreement.
Many Ghanaians remain uncomfortable with the idea of allowing former Yemeni Guantanamo detainees into the country. The pair entered Ghana earlier this month after the government struck a deal with the US. They'd been held for more than a decade in the US military prison in Cuba. Critics of the move say that the rise of militant insurgencies on the African continent means that the government should be playing it safe with security.
Despite official reassurances, many Ghanaians still fear letting two former Guantanamo detainees into the country is a risky move.
To me, I'm not happy they are being in Ghana here. Anything can happen. And if anything happens, we the Ghanaians, we the poor people will suffer for it. So we're not happy for what our leaders are doing so far.
There's a force somewhere pushing the president to do what he's doing without consulting the parliament, because the Western world controlled Africa most than our own decisions.
Open door policy is under scrutiny in Ghana. The government also resettled two Rwandans after they had been acquitted or discharged by the court prosecuting those responsible for the 1994 genocide. Relatives of Syrians already living in Ghana have been allowed to settle there also. Authorities stress that everyone being welcomed has been vetted and will be monitored. But with recent terrorist attacks in neighbouring Burkina Faso fresh on their minds, regional and national security is a big concern to some Ghanaians.
Africa is under threat. And I think that the soil is fertile. And that's the greatest problem. If you look at all the indicators that could lead to violent extremism, most of them are present today.
The two former Guantanamo detainees, who are from Yemen, thanked the Ghanaian government for welcoming them. They said they were looking forward to going home. Authorities say that should be possible in 2 years' time.
A British man wanted for questioning in England over the killing of his girlfriend and her two young children has told an extradition hearing in Ghana that he'll return to the UK voluntarily. On Tuesday, Arthur Simpson-Kent told High Court judges that he waived his right to challenge proceedings. Simpson-Kent fled to Ghana after speaking to detectives in Britain about the deaths of former EastEnders actress Sion Blake and her 8-year-old and 4-year-old sons, whose bodies were found buried in the garden of their London home. FIFA sent a formal notice to member associations on Tuesday confirming the 5 candidates in the running to take over the presidency from Sepp Blatter. FIFA's leadership has taken a battering in a series of corruption scandals. Amongst the lineup, and the only African up for Blatter's job, is South African Tokyo Sexwale. Sexwale is a business tycoon who was once imprisoned alongside late anti-apartheid icon Nelson Mandela. Sexwale struggled to gain support, though, across the continent for his bid for football's top job. Though he has been endorsed by South Africa's Football Association, it's expressed concern that his campaign has lacked dynamism. Staying with football, Nigeria crashed out of the African Nations Championship after a shock defeat against Guinea, whilst Tunisia thrashed Niger. That means Tunisia and Guinea progressed to the quarter-finals. Our regional correspondent, Duncan Woodside, is in Kigali, where the tournament is being held. He tells us more about just what went on with Nigeria.
Big shock today was the fact that Nigeria were beaten 1-0 by Guinea. That was very much unexpected. Guinea, of course, quite a small nation, around 10 million people. They don't really have much of a footballing track record, whereas Nigeria, of course, are a very big footballing nation, arguably the biggest in Africa. But today it wasn't Nigeria's day. There was a goal just before half-time by Guinea, and Nigeria were unable to get back on terms. Now, earlier in the tournament, Guinea had held Tunisia to a 2-2 draw, so they showed some sparks of invention previously, so perhaps it's not quite as big a shock as people might have imagined. However, in the other game, Tunisia thrashed Niger 5-0. The goals coming in both the first and second half, 2 in the first half, and then 3 in the second half. The cause of Tunisia helped by the fact that Niger had a player sent off. But Niger, by far the weakest team in this group, as Tunisia progress at the top of Group C, and also Guinea progressing to those quarterfinals, which will be held this weekend.
Duncan Woodside there for us in Kigali. Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks very much for joining us. Do stay tuned. A short break and more news from around the world coming up.
Talking Europe.
This week, Talking Europe is getting out into the countryside with a rural tour of Europe. The Common Agricultural Policy was revamped last year, but controversy over the end of milk quotas and its claims to help the environment have sprouted. To investigate, we talk to farmers in Belgium, Italy and Germany, and we visit the European Commissioner for Agriculture in his native Ireland. Don't miss this special, rural edition of Talking Europe.